Greetings, one and all. This is vk3sl. Welcome to the evening program. And we are just sharpening up the gramophone needles, getting ready to zip. And I've just had a bit of a rest, so recovery, sort of coming back to the in my reality pangs. Sometimes wake
Good
up.
evening.
Hello to you there, Frank. Yeah, ready to go. Yep. So
Already.
yes, good. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to hear the cast. I was a bit snoozy, I'm afraid, tonight. But yeah.
I read the interview with Hinton.
Oh, right, yeah.
Most interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting, yes. Jeffrey Hinton is one of the...
Recommend it to the listener.
Yeah, look up his interview. I mean, he just won the Nobel Prize for physics.
Yeah, he kind of knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, he's a big cheese. He's a really important figure. He's a very gentle soul, and the way he explains things is not full of all the hyperbole that a lot of other people...
I don't think he's hugging the line, like seeking the limelight.
No, not at all. I think he feels like he's on a bit of a mission to just awaken people to some of the potential existential threats of AI and how it can sort of self-educate and potentially find its own expression beyond our control. It's a very interesting argument looking at the nature of language models and such. Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. But yeah, he's one of the commentators who I feel like I can trust. Yeah. Anyhow, so here we are. I was thinking tonight of making a program about the Durrani sisters. It's Adila and Jelly Durrani, or later Adila became Adila Fakiri, and they were Hungarian fiddle players born in the 19th century who really influenced so many composers. They just had this incredible stature, and everyone seemed to fall in love with them. They just seemed to have this magnetic personality. Both of them did. And many composers wrote works for them, and they actually made quite a few recordings themselves in the early days of the century. And I found an article which sort of looks at their craft and their sort of mythology and everything else, and I thought it'd be fun to sort of just highlight them this evening. So we'll do that, but we should start off with our usual thing, play an overture or something. I've got Semiramide by Rossini. I think it's one of his operas. And this is a recording from the 20s, so I thought this would be fun to play. It's on an old Parlophone 78, so found this one on the shelf, and I think it might be a good way to start off. Now, I've just got to check that I've got all systems in order here. Sometimes the noise reduction goes out from the afternoon session to the evening session, that it needs to be reset, but it looks like...
Calibrated.
Yeah, it sort of does. Anyhow, it looks like it's still on. We'll give it a whirl, see how it goes. Do a needle drop, and with any luck, we'll be... I'm sorry, I'll play part 2 of this, by the way. It's the second section. Got 2 sides of a 12-inch record. Yes, I thought that had happened. It's exactly what I was saying. We'll shut that system down, and then I'll do a restart on it. Bear with me. So click repair. I'm very lucky to have this. It was developed by a maths professor in Adelaide, and it's a playthrough system. And it was just his experimental platform, and he with limited release. And I wrote to him and got a copy of it, and then he died shortly after. So it's not sort of in the public domain. Can be found on the Internet Archive. It's a great resource, being a playthrough system. Anyhow, I think we're in business now. Berlin State Opera Orchestra and the Semiramide by Rossini. And recording made in the 20s. Whenever I hear these groups recorded in Berlin, I always think about the stories of the recording sessions that told to me by my music teacher, by my cello teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because he studied in Berlin in the late 20s and early 30s. And very early 30s, he had to escape when Hitler came into power. But he recalled the playing with some of these groups, and he said that sometimes they'd put a red line on the score where to finish the sides, and sometimes the musicians would take a break and go down to the pub and have something to drink, and then come back and do the next side. So the recordings would get progressively looser as they went on.
A bit more from the heart.
Yes, definitely. I just love that story. I just think it's marvellous.
Story.
It is. So, that pertains to that era. Yeah, I've got a really interesting novelty now. This is one of the recordings put up by John Hanna, Mr. Vintage Sounds. He's just got thousands of recordings up now, and they're all really interesting, and he's categorised them beautifully and described them so well. And I commend his site thoroughly. It's called Vintage Sounds, and it's just a massive archive. He's got a huge collection. Sydney, I'd really like to catch up with him again. I'd love to have him on the program. He's a lawyer too, Frank.
Yes.
Yeah. And so since retiring, he has devoted himself to this, and also cataloguing organs in the Sydney area. He goes around with a group of young organists, and they sort of describe the various instruments and their state of repair, and trying to secure grants to get these instruments maintained and restored. Real noble pursuit, actually.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay.
Yeah. So
very interesting.
It is. It's a great endeavour. I'm in awe of how his knowledge of all of these instruments in obscure places, some of them are in terrible condition. When I did catch up with him in Sydney last year or the year before, we actually met at a church when he was surveying one of these instruments. He'd booked this in some time earlier, and they record it, and they have the musicians play it and test all of its registers, and they record all of this information about it, and then make a report to see if the instrument can be, if work can be done on it, because the churches themselves just can't afford to maintain a lot of these old organs.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
I guess the same thing applies in Melbourne.
Yes, I expect so. I'm sure there are groups around who are doing similar things here. Yeah.
I hope so.
I hope so, yeah, for sure. Okay, so he's put up this really unusual record. It's by a group called the Musical Avolos, and it's a group of 3 xylophone players. And apparently this group was formed around 1893. It says here by Englishman Charles Avolo Selim Wincott, and he was born in 1870, and whose stage name was Selim Avolo. Wincott was the son of a musical and circus gymnast who travelled internationally, and the Musical Avolos appeared at least in Britain and America. And they made a couple of records around the turn of the century. This is a G&T from 1904. And he actually quotes a review from the Jewish News of Northern California. This is a review from 1899. It says, the 3 Avolos are xylophone players, and while a number of such acts have been seen in times past, it is claimed that nothing the equal of the Avolos has ever been seen on the Orpheum stage. How about that for a review? I love it. So we've got to hear this group, and it's characterful, and it's very well recorded for a recording made 120-something years ago, 1904. So, let's have a listen to the Musical Avolos with the Up and Down March. I was hoping for another chorus. I reckon there might have been the marimba amongst those xylophones. Maybe. It captured very well for such a long time ago on a G&T.
Terrific.
Wasn't it good? Yeah, the music
novel.
follows. Yeah, it certainly is novel. Yeah, I was thinking I should really keep the... we started the tradition last year or some time ago of featuring forgotten singers, just one record here and there, just to sort of keep these voices in our midst. And I've got to start mining the collection here because I've got hundreds of recordings of singers and I just don't play them very often. But I noticed one thing I like about John's site is that he value adds superbly. He gives context to everything and he does his research.
Yes.
And not only does he put these records up and transfer them really well, but he supplies extra information. So he has one such forgotten singer here singing the Queen of the Night aria from the Magic Flute. Yeah. So and it's a woman called Anna Maria Giulimetti. And I can tell you from his notes here that it says here that little is known about Anna Maria Giulimetti. She was born in 1895 and died in 1982. She was born in Italy, and it appears that she made her debut in 1915 and then appeared in various places in Italy. She travelled around Central Europe, in particular Germany, in 1925 and undertook an English tour in 1926-27. Shortly afterwards, she lost her voice, apparently as the result of ear problems, and her career was interrupted for several years. She returned to the performing in 1931, and from 1946 to 75, she toured at the Geneva Conservatory. And she made a few recordings for Columbia in Milan in 1927 and 28, including this recording of the Queen of the Night aria.
Well, that's a good tester, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. I just sampled this earlier on, and it's very interesting to hear singers from this time. It's quite a different way of delivering. It's quite poised, not as sort of high-powered and dramatic and in your face. There's something quaint. But see what you think of this. It's quite interesting. Just a placement of the octaves and such. But let's have a listen to Anna Maria Giulimetti, I think. I don't know. We'll give it a go. I'm vk3sl.
vk3sl.
there we have Anna Maria.
I liked her.
I did too. I like her musicianship. There's a lot of very subtle things going on there.
There certainly are.
Yeah, there was a lot of nuance and the way she just used timing. She sometimes, borrowed from the phrase and then returned the
Did you hear the
favour.
way she speeded up in the middle of the really high bit?
Yes, she did. And it sort of adds drama. But
I think so.
it's very clever. It's a very interesting approach. And I love the way she sort of built up the phrases. Big voice.
Yeah.
Yay, there we go. That's
She was good.
It is good. It's lovely to hear these sort of forgotten sopranos. So, yeah, we'll try and keep this tradition going, and I'll start pulling records off the shelf here as well. And just one a week. We'll just sort of let it percolate.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very good.
That was a courtesy of Mr. Hannah, Mr. Vintage Sounds.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll launch into our topic of the evening. So I'm going to read an article here by Miranda Wilson, and it's from a Strings magazine. It's a magazine I borrowed from work, and they had two articles in it which really grabbed my attention. One we featured on last week's program about George Enescu, and this one is about the Durrani sisters. And it says here that it's subtitled "The Durrani Sisters Marshalled the Transition Between the 19th and 20th Centuries." Now, I'm just going to get myself into a comfortable position to read this fine print. Okay, the Hungarian-British violinists Jeli Durrani and Adila Fakiri, known in their circle as the Durrani sisters, and to critics as the Valkyries of the violin, were two of the most eminent soloists of the early 20th century. Together, they formed a violin duo unmatched before or since, says, both were powerful advocates of the new music, and their artistry-inspired compositions that include Bela Bartok's two violin sonatas, Gustav Holst's double violin concerto, Maurice Ravel's Cigane, Ethel Smythe's concerto for violin and horn, and Ralph Vaughan Williams' Concerto Academico. Adila was born in 1886 and died in 1962, and Jeli 1893 and died in 1966. They were both born into a noble but cash-strapped family in Budapest, Hungary. Their father, a chief of police, was connected by an aunt's marriage to the great violinist Joseph Joachim, a close friend of Schumann and Brahms and one of the most significant violinists of the 19th century. The sisters seemed destined to follow in Joachim's footsteps. At a young age, they attended the Royal National Hungarian Academy of Music in Budapest and were celebrated as child prodigies. Like her lesser-known sister, Hortense, Jeli intended to become a pianist, but when Adila's violin teacher, William Grunfeld, caught sight of her hands, she exclaimed that she must switch to the fiddle. Adila and Jeli both studied with Grunfeld and later with Jana Hubai, a student of Joachim. When Joachim himself heard the teenage Adila, he invited her to live with, turn the page, bear with me, live and study with him and his family home in Berlin. The lessons lasted until Joachim died a year later, but this was enough to launch Adila's career as a soloist and heir to Joachim's pedagogical lineage. That's incredibly significant. Together with Jeli and their mother, Adila made her first trip to Britain in 1908. A connection with the eminent British pianist and musicologist Donald Tovey was a helpful in for getting engagements in Britain and Europe, and the family relationship with Joachim also went a long way. One Viennese critic wrote of the sisters, Adila is already a young lady who knows what is going on and who is therefore standing on the podium with a certain dignity. Jeli, a passionately forward, storming girl whose violin playing represents a continuous outburst of temperament, or they have inherited their violin talent and musical sense from their famous relative. Both sisters played eminently musically, feel well-founded, avoid every little trick, have a warm, round tone, master the whole passage technique, and show a dexterity in bowing that is rarely observed. While Jeli's fiery playing would ultimately earn her the bigger career, Adila's classical Joachim-influenced style also won high praise. After the First World War broke out, the sisters elected to stay in Britain permanently. Adila married barrister Alexander Fakiri, and Jeli, who never married, moved in with them. The sisters, inseparable in music and life, became fixtures of the British concert scene. Now, I think at this point I might just take a break and see if I can dig up a recording. There's a recording of Joachim in 1903 in his later years.
Oh, really? Oh,
And then with Adela playing the same work,
right.
which is really very, very interesting comparison. But I've just got to see if I've got this listed here because I sampled it earlier. It just seems like the appropriate time to play that. So bear with me. I will find it here. It's yes, Joachim and Arani. I think it's Jelly Arani's playing the younger of the two sisters. Yes. Okay, here we go. It says here, this is just a little interlude. Jumping on the comparisons bandwagon here are Joseph Joachim, recording dated 1903 at the age of 72, and his grandniece Jelly Durrani, recording date 1924, age 31, playing a pretty parlour piece by Joachim. And it says, note Durrani's fidelity to many aspects of Joachim's style. And so, however, what differences there are could help illuminate for us this long-gone generational divide. So this is quite fascinating. So it's just a little party piece, but it's a romance in C major. But we'll hear this very early recording of Joachim, and then followed by his niece. Here we go. 2 comparisons from the archives. We just heard two recordings of A Romance by Joachim, the composer himself at first, and followed by Jelly Durrani, who is his grandniece, I think. A recording from the mid-1920s, a late acoustic recording. She plays with a lot of freedom. Interesting, his recording is a little bit less so, but I think he was an older person at that stage, and it wasn't long before he passed on.
It's certainly quite loose in comparison, really.
Yes, it was quite fascinating. And
good.
It is. It's great. It's interesting to sort of I wonder whether that's convention or is it just circumstance. But I just it was a fascinating comparison nonetheless, and a delightful little tune. And I really love the way she plays. It's full of whimsy and abandon. It's tremendous.
That's what I mean by loose. It's sort of freedom about it.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Yeah, so anyhow, this article goes on to acknowledge the connection with Joachim and the Durrani sisters, and it talks about, further goes on to talk about Jelly's vivid performances of Joachim's arrangements of Brahms' Hungarian folk dances, which inspired Ravel to compose Zigarren, and how a number of her recordings are immortalised. With interpretations with the pianist Conrad Boss. Now, I suppose we can just sort of harp on that a little bit longer, because there is a recording of Durrani and Conrad Boss playing the Brahms Hungarian Dance No. 8 in A minor. And it's very spirited, and I think we'll have to play this. It's marvellous. So we'll jump straight on board with another recording from the same tradition, same artist, Jelly Durrani, and Hungarian Dance No. 8, recorded about 1927. That I haven't heard flying spiccato like that for a long time. That was extraordinary. And Jelly Durrani at the fiddle there, playing the music of Brahms, very close to the source because of her association with Joachim, who of course was intrinsically connected with Brahms. In fact, Brahms wrote his violin concerto for Joachim, and they were comrades in arms for Joachim and Brahms. And
Joachim was the leading violinist of the time, wasn't he?
He certainly was, and the Bruch concerto was written for him, the Schumann concerto, the Mendelssohn, I think, All those great 19th century violin concertos were written for Joachim, who was the sort of prevailing virtuoso, apart from Paganini, who was sort of the showman.
He was in league with the devil there.
Yes, that's right.
We all know about that.
Yeah, we do indeed. But Joachim is very much the sort of schooled Germanic fiddle player of his time, and who had toured constantly, really, right up until the end. And he had a great string quartet as well. So, yeah, we're very lucky we have those handful of recordings of Joachim made around the turn of the century, although he's far from he's well past it. But there is a lot to be gained from listening to them stylistically, and and insights into his mannerisms and such.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those recordings of the music of Brahms played by Jelly Durrani. It says here that they acknowledged for the robust tone and spectacular control of virtuoso bow strokes, absolutely no doubt about that, and marvellously flexible approach to vibrato. It's a very natural vibrato, and it's quite idiosyncratic and quite, again, I reckon it's partly language derived. There's something deeply cultural about that type of vibrato. You just couldn't imitate it. I think it comes from somewhere deep.
Right.
A deep understanding. It's not sort of soupy rubato. It's rubato that reflects poise of some other, deeper association perhaps.
Sure.
Yeah, but I love that playing. I think it's magnificent. So that's just an example of Jelly Durrani's playing. She made many records. She did a fabulous Vitali Chacon. I'd love to. I don't know if there'll be scope to play it tonight. We'll see. Otherwise, I could play it for an afternoon program, or we could have another session.
Yeah.
And play. It's just marvelous. She made a lot of recordings. Her sister Adila Fakiri and. She's the older of the sisters, and she did actually study with Joachim, and it says here that there's a few solo recordings of hers, and but it says here by contrast show a kind of intense seriousness. This article says. Might be a bit of a generalisation, but it says here a 1927 recording of Beethoven's Opus 96 Sonata with Donald Tovey reveals their perfect entente as a chamber ensemble. Even the limitations of the century-old technology can't conceal the incandescent blend of tonal qualities and a limpidly lyrical approach to Beethoven's voice leading. I utterly confer. I listened to this on the way home from work today, and it is absolutely magnificent. It's such great playing. Tovey was, he was sort of known as a musicologist and as a composer. He wrote all those deep analysis of 19th century music we used to study, and they're still relevant to scholars today. They're a really important resource, his academia. But he was a fabulous pianist, very, very gifted pianist, and a part of the establishment in the 20s. And he can't be forgotten. When you hear playing like this, it's just, there's something really marvellous going on here. So I'll play the first movement of this Beethoven sonata, but I commend it, though. It's just tremendous playing. Allegro moderato. This is the Opus 96 Sonata number 10 in G with Adila Fakiri, or Adila Durrani was her maiden name, and Donald Tovey. chamber music of the highest order, music of Beethoven, his Violin Sonata in G, Opus 96, number 10.
Beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pity the microphone was close to the piano, but that didn't. You could still get a keen sense of how integrated that performance was.
Yeah.
And musically, they were exactly the same path. It was very unified performance. Wonderful playing. I love Tovey's playing. God, he's an amazing pianist. I had no idea he was that good. That's well, I suppose I should expect it when his musical treatises are very, very academic, and his understanding of the canon, particularly the classical music and classical era and Romantic era, is probably his books are sort of seen as the go-to texts. Anyhow, but that was the music of Adila Fakiri and Mr. Tovey. Scottish, I think he was. Now, I'll just play one more featuring Adila, and I think the choices of repertoire don't necessarily show off the same thing, so I think it's not really easy to compare them in this sort of situation, but there's not that many recordings of her, and I'd like to share this one, which is I'm quite keen to hear. I only sampled the beginning of it. It's a recording of a Vivaldi concerto. I'll just play the first movement.
Oh, right.
Yeah, one of the Vivaldi Opus 3. You don't usually hear recordings of Vivaldi from the 1920s. Vivaldi was pretty much unknown except for, well, I don't think even the Four Seasons were recorded until the 40s. There was just a handful of concertos that sort of did the rounds or movements thereof.
Our music appreciation teacher never played him.
Yeah.
And I asked him in later life why he never did to us at school. He said we hadn't heard of him.
Yeah, this is it. I think Vivaldi really wasn't on the map at all.
I mean, people had heard of him, but no one knew much about him.
Yeah. See, Vivaldi didn't have that many opuses. I think he only had about 10 or something. He wrote an enormous amount of music, but very little of it was published. And it's sort of in more recent times that we sort of have that, the insight because they've found the archives and they've expunged them. But yeah, this is a well-known concerto. You hear students play it all the time, but it's a beautiful concerto and it's a very unusual interpretation. And I quite savour it. I think it's marvellous, very, very lyrical. And I always love hearing Baroque music played at a slower tempo and lyrical, and celebrating its the poise and the sense of line. So here we go, Vivaldi Concerto in A minor, Opus 3, number 6. someone dropped something right at the end. Yes, the Vivaldi Concerto in A,
Oh,
Opus
lovely.
3, one of the Allegro harmonica, the harmonic whim.
Yeah, there's a series in there.
It is. So, great concerto. Played with the piano and full of beautiful legato playing and lots of attention to vibrato and continuous vibrato and lovely sweeping phrases, the way I like it. Yeah, there we go. And good tempo. I like the tempo too.
Yes, very, very suitable.
I thought so too. It's often played double that speed. His students play it all the time. Anyhow, that was the... so we heard a couple of examples of each of these, of their playing. Now, it goes on to say that if the Durrani's solo playing styles were individualistic, their duo performances show such cohesion it's hard to tell them apart. Violin duets, as opposed to string quartets and piano trios, were not seen as a particularly important chamber music, but the Durrani sisters brought the medium to a new prominence. Their signature repertoire included the duets of Louis Spohr, who was an acquaintance of Joachim's, meaning that their 1927 recordings of Spohr's music the closest we can get to the composer's intention. I should play something. I will play. I'll just jump in and play some Louis Spohr, one of their duets. These are absolutely sublime. And yes, they are as one. They play together beautifully. So here we go. Here is a... Larghetto, I think. It's from this duet in D, opus 67, number 2. So, yeah, an example of Spohr's music played by the Durrani sisters. Yeah, music of Louis Spohr, played by two very two artists with a beautiful sense of mutual understanding of the work. And as they say here, they're almost indistinguishable. I couldn't really distinguish the two apart.
Oh, I wouldn't have a hope.
No, they've played with a really similar musical understanding
That's
of
right.
the work. Yeah, so
It's lovely, lovely stuff.
it is beautiful music, actually. The music of Spohr. I don't know it very well, and I sort of feel encouraged to look into it a bit more, perhaps. Yeah. So what else? They also recorded. This is the one. I got one recording of them here in my collection. Their records are rare as hen's teeth. And the only one I've got is a recording of them both playing the Bach D minor concerto, the double concerto. So I'll have to play that.
Yeah.
I'll play the first movement anyhow, and we might play the last movement at the very end. Yeah, I've got that lined up here. It's on a pink Vocadia, and I remember finding this, and my jaw hit the ground because you just don't see their records in Australia. Yeah, a recording made with Stanley Chappell and a scratch orchestra in the mid-1920s. They're both acknowledged on the label, and so I've got it on the turntable now. And we'll hear this. It's the famous Bach double, but yeah, again you'll hear that they are absolutely on the same page. So bear with me while I just quickly get the.
Just while you're doing it, I need to say I'm vk3jr, crossband duplex working vk3sl 2 meters to 160 meters.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, and just acknowledging the fact that we are going out not on 40 tonight. 40 meters not really a nighttime band in this situation, but yeah, we're going out 160 and also on UHF and also a presence online streaming. All right, here we go. I think we're in business. So here we go. A record, 1920 mumble. Okay, it's all I can offer you.
Lovely to hear Baroque music played nice and sedately, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is, definitely. And it's very interesting to hear them playing just a gentle, but it is a flying staccato.
That's right.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Got a
It's,
lovely rich tone, haven't they?
yeah, definitely.
Beautiful, full, nice,
Mm.
really nice.
Yeah, it's soulful playing, and
That's the one.
it is. Yeah, so
I enjoyed that.
yeah, I did too, Frank. It's great. We'll play the last movement or part of it. That's all I've got is just this incomplete set. But we'll play the middle movement or the slow movement at the end shortly, actually. I won't go long. There's so much of their music. They went on and made many, many recordings of duet repertoire, mainly Baroque music.
Really.
And
If that's anything to go by, they would be very well worth hearing.
yeah, I'll have to devote. This is like a taster, really, because without all of the stories, we could just play a whole stack of their Baroque music. Because they've got they do the Purcell Golden Sonata, they do Handel sonatas, they play music of Boccherini.
Oh,
There's
lovely.
music of Pugnani. There's Galuppi. There's all sorts of music that no one else played, which they featured and recorded as duets in the 20s.
Yeah, that's
So,
terrific.
which is just a remarkable feat, really. There's nothing quite like it. And that's the sort of that's what makes this whole story sort of come alive, is they both had these distinct solo careers and were significant figures, and another thing we haven't looked at really is the number of composers who were inspired by them and wrote great works. But the sad thing was that they never recorded any of them. They couldn't, I suppose. It was so hard to record concertos, and they were probably seen as second-tier players anyhow. Even if they wanted to, would have been difficult to do.
Yes.
So, and being women as well wouldn't have made it any easier. But when you think that Holst wrote his double violin concerto for them, and I mean, that's a magnificent work. You don't hear it very often, but wouldn't have been marvelous if they'd recorded. Or the Vaughan Williams Concerto Academico would have been great.
Oh,
Would
yeah.
have been great to hear that.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no recording of Jelly Durrani playing the Zagan. I do have a story about that, and I think I might have related this earlier. But one of my music professors at uni went to a private. He was English, and he recalled in his youth when he was at the Royal Academy in the 50s, going to a soiree in a private home where Jelly Durrani played, and he said she had incredible presence. He said that she walked into the room, she was just this magnet. Everyone was
Right.
really sort of drawn to her. She would have been an older woman then.
Yeah.
And she got up and played the cigar, and he said it was like nothing they'd heard. And she well and truly retired at this stage, but he said it was just incredible. And he asked her about it, and she said, "My dear, I am Zagan." It was the story. I will never forget that comment, and I thought, well, wow.
Well, she was.
She certainly was. It was written for her, and it emboldened her, and yeah, it's
He's
just...
allowed to say that.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a story that's gone down through
It's
the
lovely,
ranks.
isn't it?
It is. It's a beautiful story. He said it was captivating. Yeah, it was a bit sad for her at the end because she had a car accident, a terrible car accident in the 30s, and it wrecked her hearing.
Oh, no.
So her solo career was sort of foreshortened by that. And
Oh, that's terrible.
yeah, affected her
For a
hearing.
muso to lose their hearing is about as bad a thing. Almost, it's second only to losing your facility with the instrument.
Yes, definitely. And it didn't, I mean, she could still hear, but she lost her ability to play well. She had perfect intonation all her career.
Yeah.
And she's one of the, I mean, when you listen to that score, it's so perfectly in tune, as was the Bach we just heard. I mean, it's impeccable intonation.
Yeah.
Perfect pitch. But after the accident, she lost that skill.
Well, you'd have to hear, you need the feedback, surely.
So something happened that controlled her motor skills and her hearing, and she just couldn't.
As well, the motor skills.
And she
too.
just wasn't playing in tune first class. And it happened overnight. It happened after the accident.
Yeah.
So it's very sad. It happened, but something similar happened to Fritz Kreisler. He had towards the end of his life, he was knocked over by a truck in a New York street. He was absent-mindedly crossing the road, and he was in a coma for weeks, and they didn't think he'd ever come out. He actually woke up out of his coma speaking ancient Greek. This is the story.
Oh my
which
God.
is very strange. I think he must have, he could speak many languages, so I suppose something triggered something. But
Yeah.
anyhow, he did recover his prowess to a point, but he heard everything above a certain octave, certain range. He heard everything about a minor third higher than it really was.
Oh my God, what a terrible thing for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, terrible. So he had to actually translate it. He had to re-educate his ear to play. But look, it was at the end of his career anyhow.
Oh God, that's
And
terrible.
like see, Kreisel was someone who never ever played out of tune
Yeah.
until after his accident. So there are stories of people whose hearing is affected by a head injury. Musicians who have that terrible affliction. Anyhow, what else does it tell us about these wonderful women? Although the technology of the time wasn't quite up to capturing the full sound of the orchestra, Jelly and Adela's playing is perfectly matched. This refers to the recording we just heard. The intonation exquisite, in dialogue of true equals. Both use flying staccato stroke yes for passages where present-day players might play detaché or spiccato. Yeah, but I love the flying staccato. It's marvellous.
It was.
And it's very much from that Hungarian tradition. It's very aesthetic. Jelly told a biographer in later life that the sisters had inherited this use of flying spiccato from Joachim and Hubei, and that she considered it both thrilling and perilous, even rebuking players who played it safe by not daring to throw their bows about. Present-day ears may be surprised by the use of portamento in Baroque repertoire. This is, something we know that they did, but by the standards of the time, it's actually fairly sparing.
Yeah.
In a 1950 essay for Music and Letters, Fakiri explained that she considered excessive same-finger portamento as an offence to any ear familiar with classical style, recalling that Hubei and Joachim rebuked her for the habit. She wasn't a fan of mid-century trend for unremitting, nauseating vibrato, but neither sister was a reactionary stuck in the past. Responding to criticisms that recorded music was ruining modern violin playing, Fakiri retorted, "I do not blame the gramophone or radio for the poor quality of so many of today's violinists. If a truly musical spirit exists in a performer, it will emerge to triumph." Was her retort. The principal thing for the young player is to aim at an understanding of the phrases, penetration of the moods of the music in hand, a grasp of the significance of the composer's message. That's all very good. But it's just a pity we can't. It would be so good to hear them play modern music, because they were so known for playing contemporary works. Yet we just don't have any of that.
No.
It's strange how the legacy is sort of one-dimensional in a way, just by default. But there's a strange story here, which is completely, it's just, hype. I don't believe an ounce of it, but I'll read it out nevertheless. It says, the sisters' commitment to finding messages from the composers took a strange turn in the 1930s when they made news headlines with the claim that they had contacted the ghost of Robert Schumann via a Ouija board. Also present at the seances was a Swedish diplomat named Erik Palstemira, who documented the outlandish tale and horizons of immortality in 1938. According to Palstemira, Schumann ordered the Duranis to retrieve the manuscript of his lost violin concerto from a Berlin library and premiere the work. Following this ghostly visitation, Jelly embarked on a fruitless quest to track down the score. Palestina approached archivists in Berlin but found himself up against a hostile Nazi bureaucracy who wanted it for themselves, and ultimately Jelly had to content herself with being the third performer of the work after George Kulenkampff and Yehudi Menuhin. Yes, the work was found, but it was always there. It was a good story, but stretched credulity. The media were quick to point out inconsistencies, such as the Durrani's pretense that they had never heard of the Schumann violin concerto. Surely critics reasoned Joachim would have informed his own family that he himself had suppressed the manuscript on the grounds that he and Clara Schumann thought it a lesser work. Moreover, Joachim had already described the piece at length to his 1901 biographer, Andrea Moser. The manuscript was therefore neither lost nor unknown. The squabble over the concerto dismayed the Schumann's sole surviving child Eugenie, who tried unsuccessfully to maintain her mother's embargo on the work. Even if Jelly didn't get to premiere the Schumann, some good came out of the episode. A major concerto received a much-deserved revival, and the publicity brought new life to her faltering career. However, ill health put a stop to her high-profile concertising for good by the 1940s after a head injury. That's what we've just talked about. After Adila's husband died, the sisters went to live together in Florence, where they continued to give concerts together. They were inseparable until the last. When Adila died in Jelly's arms, the loss was a devastating blow from which Jelly's friends feared she would not recover. But it's sad, but she lasted another 3.5 years. She gave occasional concerts, now with Adila's daughter Adrienne in her place. The Durrani sisters present a crucial link in the history of violin performance, bridging performance practices of the 19th century with the beginning of modern recording era. Their achievements as pioneering female soloists in the concert hall are matched by their achievements in the recording studio. As we rediscover their recordings today, we don't just hear historical curiosities, but timeless examples of the highest levels of musicianship. The Valkyries of the violin may be gone from the stage, but their commitment to artistry endures in their recorded legacy. So we've got here, to ride out, I'll play the other movement of the Bach, but just before doing so, we'll play one other thing with the two of them. Now, you choose, because we've got this Boccherini Opus 7, we've got Pugliani Opus 1, number 6. These are just sort of short, one side of a record, parts of the works. There's a Handel Trio Sonata in G. There's the Purcell Golden Sonata as well.
Don't know that.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, sure, we'll play it. Jelly Durrani, Adila Fakiri, and Ethel Hobday, Purcell Golden Sonata, Opus 16, number 31. This will be fun. What the other comment is, we've got the whole sonata. This is good. Recorded for Vocalion in July 1925, same time as that record we just heard. Largo, Canzona, and Grave El Molto Maestoso and Allegro Scherzando. Oh, this will be great. I've never heard this myself. So, but we've got all these other works, so we'll have to just sort of keep this topic alive and enjoy their music. It's just a great story, and nice to hear this beautiful, unified, and playing of a great tradition. Here we go. Jelly Durrani, it's on the list, ready to go. We'll hear this now on vk3sl. ago. That was the music of Purcell, his Golden Sonata.
That's really nice.
Beautiful work. Yeah. I can't recall having heard that before. There's all these lovely little sort of little snippets, little small works that for two fiddles, and so we'll sort of keep them in our midst, I think.
You betcha.
Well, Frank, I reckon we'll wind at this point, but I've got just two sort of short offerings to ride the program. One is, well, I've got the original disc here of the Bach double, so we'll play what I've got of the Largo, half the Largo.
Yeah.
That's all I have. I mean, there are other versions online, but I'd love to play this version, this original recording.
Oh, sure.
And then there's a bit of a treat. I won't announce it, but it's a recording. I'm going to give Jelly Durrani the last word. It's a work we often finish the program with, and I'm sure you'll love it, and I'm sure the listener will too. And that'll be our wine for today, and we'll be back again tomorrow afternoon and Sunday because I'm homebound. I've got to just work a lot this weekend, and we'll just have our usual afternoon sessions to complement things. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Frank. Thanks for sharing in all of this little nostalgia trip.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So we shall speak tomorrow.
Indeed, absolutely.
I hope we have the listener back tomorrow.
I hope so too. Thank you, listeners. Thank you for being there and sharing in all of this. It's lovely to have your company. It really is. So, yay. All right, without any further ado, we'll hear the Bach. And I haven't got the last movement. I've got half the Largo. And then a bit of a treat to finish up with Jelly giving us just a little solo. But so until soon, we'll say our cheerios.
Cheerio, as Kevin Hines would have said.
Yeah, that's
Cheerio.
right.
And this is vk3sl going to listening.
Okay, vk3sl. Likewise, listening for our last two offerings and thanking the listener.